Come one, come all, because we're here back with Toy Connections Online, or TKO, for another live and riveting discussion for all things pop culture, past, present, and future. So I just want to say, from 2011 to 2019, there was a certain television program that was definitely destination programming for television screens and streaming services all across the globe. Hi again, everyone. This is Ken. I'm your host, and I would be remiss if I didn't at least try to have this conversation with a couple of friends. And these people are definitely Game of Thrones fans in their own right. No, I'm not reading off a script. I am literally just shooting off the hip right now. So if I stutter, so be it. I can't edit it out. All right. So, first person I'm going to bring on screen, I just want to say Cody Rhodes had it right when his theme song begins with the words, "Wrestling has more than one royal family," because this person most definitely does come from wrestling royalty. So I'm going to bring on the badass biatch herself, the lady of House Slaughter, Kelly Slaughter daughter Remus. How are you, my friend?
Hello. I feel like I need a crown after that intro.
Well, something like that, a crown, a scepter, something. Yeah.
Something.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for making it on. I know we had to kind of look at some time scheduling, and we were going to go on tomorrow, and you reminded me tomorrow was Father's Day, and I'm like, oh, I guess I can't go on either. So. Yes.
I don't think my my husband and my dad would have been very happy with me.
Yeah. Apparently, I've got some stuff to do tomorrow as well. So what that happens to be, we'll find out.
Yes.
All right.
Well, happy Father's Day.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And happy Father's Day to all the dads across the globe. And well, we got one more friend to introduce on here. This is the individual who, at the end of my first stream, actually coined the term Toy Connections Online, or TKO. This man has a voice that's fit for radio, but a haircut that's definitely suitable for streams. The man with 1,000 charms, a guy that I knighted just before we came on the stream, which is why we are 2 minutes late. I will bring on Sir Hans of House Chow. My man, how you doing?
First of his name, sketcher of sketches, speaker of nonsense.
And speaking of sketcher of sketches, in the chat right now, Zazel has shown your Instagram account. So Zazel is on, Gaz is on, Ryan Sweeney is apparently a new channel member. And, well, Hans has a doppelganger in the chat, as I like to say.
It's me.
So, yes. Oh, it's just you. Okay. Well, and if you guys hear a bell in the background, that's Kelly's new cat that's riding around the room. But I think she's going to. I think the kitten's going to behave. If not, Kelly has to lay down the slaughter daughter law. I heard.
I do.
Yes.
Gonna get kicked out of this room if he keeps it up.
I see. Yeah. All right. Well, so I mean, I just wanted to jump right into it. I mean, you guys are both huge fans of this series, and I just wanted to get your guys' respective thoughts retroactively on the franchise now that it's a little bit older. So, Hans, let's start with some overall thoughts from you.
I already told you offline, and I will stand by this. I think that Game of Thrones will go down in history, at least for me, as probably one of the greatest medieval fantasy series of our time.
Yeah.
The acting was excellent. The writing was excellent. A lot of the direction was very good. The actors didn't ham anything up. Everyone carried themselves very well. The storylines were relatable. They were intriguing. They were interesting. There were lots of twists. There were lots of turns. That being said, a lot of people, most people only have a real big problem with the last season. I will also like to go down on record saying that season should have been 2 episodes longer for sure.
At least
2 more. Agreed. I will also like to go down saying this particular analogy. Game of Thrones is like a relationship with a wonderful girl, and it was fantastic for 10 years, but eventually you go your separate ways and you parted amiably. Just because it ended and just because the ending wasn't great and it's not what you want and you didn't get married doesn't mean the previous 10 years of it wasn't fantastic. But certainly it was fantastic, even if the ending itself wasn't perfect.
A little subpar. Well,
I agree.
and I will jump in for a second there. If anybody is watching the stream and does not want spoilers, which, given that the series is now 3 years old, I would say that the internet probably already spoiled it 15 or 20 times over for you guys. And so jump out now or forever hold your peace. And with that, we turn this over to the Slaughter Daughter for her retroactive thoughts.
I loved Game of Thrones. It's definitely one of my favorite shows ever. It's one of my favorite genres of movies and TV. I actually surprisingly did not know that it was a book series until I saw the previews that it was coming out. And so I was like, what? Then I need to read this before I watch it. Because we all know the books are always better than the movie or better than the show. So I was like, I have to read this before it comes out. So I got it, started reading it on a trip to Vegas, fell in love with it, did not get to finish it before it started. So I was reading while I was watching, trying to keep up. But I love the show. And I actually agree with everything Hans said, except for actually liking the last season. I do agree it needed to be 2 more episodes at least, but I just don't know what happened with that season. It was like, this is way too fast, and they left things out and things that happened, earlier in the series. We don't even know what that was for now. It was like for nothing. But yeah, otherwise I do agree with what you said, Hans.
So I'm going to pause right there for a sec, because as much as the last season is a little bit panned or very much panned by critics, I don't really think it starts going downhill until, spoiler alert, the battle at Winterfell with the Night's King and the undead army. I think it's after that it goes downhill. I think if you watch up to that point, it's still excellent. Now, are there certain situations, like at the end of season 7, where they say, Daenerys' dragon flies all the way from Dragonstone all the way up to the wall in what seems to be about 5 minutes, right? We don't know that it is, and Jon and those guys are all sitting on that hill for probably what should have been 7 or 8 days, but then Dany shows up in minutes. So that's why, I mean, yes, there's a little bit of that, but I'm excusing that because the awesomeness kind of overrode it. A bit of a plot hole, but for me, it doesn't go downhill until after Arya stabs the Night King and the entire army goes to hell. So I think if you get to that point and you want to stop, you're just like, yeah, I'll just skip the rest. I would forgive any Game of Thrones fan for feeling that way.
So you didn't like Arya being the one to kill the Night King?
Oh, no. I liked it. I said up to, and I should say including that point.
Okay.
I should state that, because once she does that, it's like, yes, big victory at the end of the Battle of Winterfell, right? And we're going to get to Arya when Hans gets to talk about some scenes he really likes and some characters he really likes. But for me, it's after that when they kind of ramp up to the final battle at King's Landing, which of course feels very, very anticlimactic. That's my feeling, right? So.
You want me to go at it, or you want me to go with this? Or
oh, you know what? You've got a really hot take just on the tip of your tongue right now.
I do.
And anyone who knows Hans knows that is must-watch programming just as much as an episode of Game of Thrones. So let's hear it.
Game of Thrones, to me, has never been one of those series and or seasons which is supposed to look. It's a terrible world that these people live in. I mean, there's a lot of death, and they go over, and there's a lot of disease, and it's a miserable world. This is not Lord of the Rings by any stretch of the imagination. It was never meant to have any kind or any semblance of a happy ending. So the reality is, in the first season, spoiler alert, they throw a child out of a window. You know what I mean? So the idea and de-evolution, even the anticlimactic nature of the final battle, it's not meant to be happy. It's not meant to be. I mean, maybe the writers went a little far in making us miserable for the last season, but certainly aside from they should have dragged it out for 2 more episodes at the very least, I don't feel like the anticlimactic nature of the final battle is an issue, at least not for me. Because as I've told everyone, I watched this 2 years after it came out because everybody was yelling some very strong opinions and everybody felt very hurt by certain things. And I like to be late to the party just because if I'm going to be hurt, I want to be hurt in a vacuum and I want to hurt myself. So when I saw the last battle and the nature of the whole thing, because there was no doubt that the Lannister forces, the Golden Company, they've lost already. There was no doubt in anybody's mind. These people had just taken out the Night King. They outnumbered them. It was going to be a terrible battle. We knew it was going to be a massacre. The only question is what kind of massacre, right? Was it just going to be a surrender, or was it going to be a flame broiling? And it became a flame broiling, and I was all right with that. To me, the shortcomings of the show were very small, maybe 0.5% of it, maybe 0.5. And I spent the whole week kind of researching points to defend this, even though I know that y'all really have the high ground here, and I'm probably going to lose an arm and both legs and become Darth Vader.
I don't know, Kelly. How do you feel about his hot take right now?
I mean, I actually don't disagree with what he's saying, with what you're saying. I don't. I think you're right. I think there was a lot of really good storytelling, and it's not meant to be a happy ending. The ending, though, I feel like I did want a happy ending, but I know that doesn't happen in Game of Thrones world. George R.R. Martin does not write things that way. But I think that the writers and the showrunners got a little lost when there weren't any more books. And even though it said that George Martin did tell them where he wanted the show or where he felt the story would end, I don't know. I think they just got lost because really they were just following his writing for the most part. I mean, I know it got away from the books a lot as the seasons went on, but they just lost a little something. I still, I did say I didn't like the last season, but I enjoyed it. For the cinematography and some of the way the storylines ended, I liked. But and what happened to Dany, I think that was really what pissed me off the most, was where Bran ended up, where Dany ended up, and where Jon ended up. Those were the things that I didn't like.
So,
and I didn't like. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Jump in. Go for it.
And
go for it.
Jaime going back to Cersei. What the f is up with
After all that.
After all that development and his growth and everything, he freaking goes back to Cersei. What?
And this is the passion that I ask these two individuals to bring to the camera. Right?
Just wait.
Yep.
Just wait.
Everything you guys said is by and large and basically how I feel. Now, about the whole source material thing, like they seem to run out of material after book 5, which kind of parallels season 5 and part of season 6. And then because George Martin had written a huge chunk of the 6th book, which still isn't out, but that's a whole other side topic. They were able to get through season 6, I think, due to like huge revelations and momentum alone, made season 6, in my mind, the best season, which we can get to in a bit. Yes. And in season 7, you still have a lot of that momentum, but then you feel certain plot holes start to surface. By the final season, you're like, how do we wrap this up? How do we button this up? Because you get to that last episode, and we'll move on to stuff that we like. So we're not just here to hate on it, everyone. But when you get to that last episode and you're trying to button things up, everything feels kind of like shoehorned and strung together in a way that doesn't feel organic anymore, right? Daenerys all of a sudden becomes her dad. She spends 7.5 seasons trying to avoid being her dad. but she's her dad. It's like, okay, so well, why did it take her so long to become that way? And then on top of that, all of a sudden you have this meeting of everyone at the end. We're like, how are we going to rule Westeros now? I mean, that scene just felt like it was just sort of dropped in there. And after all that, they're like, okay, Jon, you're going back to the Night's Watch. And simultaneously, as he says, there's still a Night's Watch. Millions of people across the globe are saying it with him. We're like, or hundreds of millions, there's still a Night's Watch. Like, I can hear the echo across every country. I'm like, why is there still a Night's Watch? But of course, there's a sequel series, which Kelly told me about last night. So maybe there's a reason, but at the time, 3 years ago, it just felt weird.
The night is dark and it's still full of terrors.
Yeah.
Night is dark and full of terrors. There you
go.
There you go. Right?
Skipping back a little bit. Shoot, Kelly made a point and I thought of something and then I saw a Kiki and then I forgot.
I jumped in for a 15 minutes to throw you off.
You were talking about I know it's perfect distraction. Fooey. It'll come back.
It'll come back around. The carousel will come back.
Yeah, it'll all come back around. It'll all come back. Right, here we go. Like it just came back around. Right. So an analogy I'd like to draw is an artist copying another artist's work. Right. So you see a lot of people attempt to do Jack Kirby's original artwork and they'll do it in his style, but you know it's not him because it lacks that life in it. So Alien and Aliens, right? The sequel, as Ridley Scott and James Cameron. It was the same source material, but James Cameron knew he couldn't do what Ridley Scott did, so he did his own thing, right? And both came out brilliantly because they played to their own strengths. The two new writers, I can't remember their names, George R. R. Martin gave them this source material and they worked on everything there and it was wonderful up until they ran out of source material. And then they knew where it was supposed to go. But instead of being themselves, they tried to be George R. Martin. And when you try to be someone else, you naturally deny your own creativity. So I think if they fell more into being themselves, or if perhaps the company they're working for allowed them to be themselves, they would have been able to generate something more personable and they wouldn't be under so much fire right now. And I do feel it for them because a lot of people stoned those poor two guys for what happened. And I don't think it's their fault. There's a lot of stuff working here. And George R. R. Martin is an extraordinarily experienced writer who wrote for novels. You know, he's a novelist. And these two guys write for television and they are two very different skills. And they really did their best with what I suspect is very little. So I try not to harp too hard on them. And I also can't bring into focus enough that there's a parent company over them forever expecting something of them. And when you're two untried and untested writers, which they weren't, by the way, it still can be very scary. So tit for tat, you give them a little something. At least I try to.
All right. Well, people tend to agree with you. I mean, blaming the writers or blaming the producers are, what do you call it? It's okay. HBO kind of put them maybe in a bit of a corner. Like, okay, you guys wrap this up. You got X number of episodes and this much budget.
It's not even that. It's like there's this genius, and I want you to be that genius.
Yeah.
I'm not in my 50s. I'm in my 30s. He's had 30 more years than I've had to perfect his craft. And also, he's been writing these books since the 90s. So,
Well, yeah.
And he's still not even finished with
the sixth book.
So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So hopefully, guys in the chat, let me know how the volume is. I was asked to adjust the volume a little bit because Hans's mic was apparently low. So I boosted you about 40%. So hopefully it's don't worry about it now because I think I got you. I think I got you good and set now, which is funny because on previous streams I've been with you, your mic's always been fine. So, but I'm sure whatever.
Probably shout louder.
That's okay. That's okay. So I got to be honest, right? As far as all the tragedy and everything that happens in this series, they take you right through the ringer. You go through the Red Wedding. And my hot take is that I was not a big fan of season 3. Right? Because each season ends with either some big moment, some big battle, whether it's a key character dying in season 1, a big battle in season 2, the Night's Watch battle in season 4, The big battle, like the almost battle with the Night's King in season 5. Season 3 had the Red Wedding, and it was shocking, but it didn't have the excitement. It was just shocking for the sake of shocking. So like for me, I actually rank season 3 pretty low, and everyone else ranks it really high because they love the Red Wedding. So that's my hot take on some of this.
Yeah.
What? Oh, you want her to go first?
Oh, you want me to go first?
Say. Yeah, he's going to counter my point for about 10 minutes. Okay. Okay.
The Red Wedding, obviously, and we all read the books, so we knew that was coming. My husband did not know that was coming. So, ow, sorry, my cat just tried to climb up my leg with his claws.
Oh, the claws.
I'm in shorts.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
The way to be.
Well, now I lost my train of thought. The Red Wedding. Okay, so yeah, so my husband, I knew it was coming, so I pretty much was like watching him instead of watching, the show, just because I wanted to see his reaction to everything. But when I read that in the books, I threw the book across the room, got out of bed. I was like screaming, "What? I can't believe it! I can't believe it!" And my husband's going, "What's wrong?" Threw it across the room. I think I walked over to it. I think I stomped on it a few times. And my husband's like, "What is going on up there?" Because I was upstairs, he was downstairs. And I was like, "I can't tell you because I'll ruin the show for you. So I can't tell you, but everyone I love is dead. And it sucks." So I would say that I did not like that season either because of all the tragedy and wanting to know, like, maybe they'll change that part in the show and they get to live, and let's see where that goes. And they changed some things, like the baby or the fiance, which I'm blanking on her name right now, Rob's fiance, which they weren't married in the books, right?
No,
it was the opposite way.
Talisa, or what was her name? It started with a T.
It started with a T. I think you're right. I think it was Talisa or Talisi or something. But she was pregnant in the show and in the books, but she gets away.
Yes.
In the books. So there is a Stark baby running around that. Do they ever even come back to that in the books? I can't remember.
Well, the books only get they only get to season 5. So they only get the 5th book. So yeah, I'm just looking up. Yeah, Talisa. It's Ula Chaplin. Ula Chaplin's the actress who's also in Black Mirror for a great episode. All right, do we want to turn this over to Hans? And do I need to take some cover?
No, not at all. I just say, because I watched the whole thing, it's very difficult for me to distinguish season from episode because I watch everything in a row. So to me, it's just another episode. And when you watch the next one, it just feels like a logical progression. But once again, playing to the whole idea that misery is misery. And this show delves very deeply into human misery. Rob committed an offense in that show, and no ill deed or good deed, actually, or noble deed goes unpunished in this show. He promised himself to Walder Frey. He betrayed Walder Frey, and even though he offered a tully in response to bond the two families, Frey knew that he had a price to pay, and he did indeed make him pay that price. Roose Bolton also, we knew was kind of sketchy, especially from the books, if you know what he goes on. Was making his power play as well, and we know what he's about. And when I talk about Tywin later, we'll get more into that. We know he was making his move. So if you watch it episodically and you didn't consume, because that one season a year, if I just watched that one season, I had to wait an entire year, I'd have been pissing myself until the following year. That's
how some of us were, right?
I can imagine. That's 5-6 months of gray hairs, really. And So what I did is I said, because when you watch it episodically, it hits much. It's much more gentle, and I was okay with that. Now that I'm not speaking about the actual scene itself, because certainly in it was upsetting to watch. Especially as a father, anytime you watch any kind of pregnant woman get harmed, I told myself, and I knew it was coming, and prepared myself as, right, you're a big boy, here we go. You weep. And of course, Caitlyn murders this girl. Her last act is out of desperation and fear and all these. She kills this girl, and then someone kills her, and you followed her for so long, and you saw the love of her children, and she's a good wife in a sea of people who are terrible wives. She's a good wife, and she's a loyal to her people and her children, and then she died, and it's just like, well, she's dead, and Ed is dead, and Rob is dead, and everybody I loved is dead, and depression. And of course, I just watched the next episode and I feel better. You guys would have had to deal with that for 8 months.
You are lucky, because I jumped into Game of Thrones between seasons 2 and 3 myself, but I got season 1 on DVD the Christmas of that year, and season 2 hadn't come out on DVD yet. So I could binge the first season. I waited a month. I bought the second season, I binged it, and then I went episodically. And the first season I saw on an episode by episode basis was that third season that ended with the Red Wedding.
So both of you got that gut shot and then had to wait.
We got the gut shot. So, tell you how I feel about it, because you're built to think the Starks are the good guys, but they're really a very tragic family. And you get put through the ringer of Ned Stark dies at the end of season 1. The family gets behind him. Robb Stark makes some mistakes as the new head of the family. And then everyone else dies. Arya gets away. Sansa gets away. And then at the end of season 5, they leave you with the cliffhanger of Jon Snow. Sorry.
Targaryen.
Yeah, Targaryen. Jon Snow, Stark Targaryen, whatever, first of his name. Gets stabbed and left for dead in the snow due to Sir Alliser betraying him. So House Stark is like falling apart, and you have yet another cliffhanger at the end of season 5, which was more exciting leading up to that. So I give season 5 more of a pass than season 3. But to me, that's what makes that 6th season more gratifying, because now we're going to get into the good moments, because you start the season and 2 episodes in, Jon Snow comes back to life. And then they start doing this revelation of what's going on in the past as Bran becomes a 3-eyed raven, and you see this amazing battle with Sir, oh my goodness, he was called the Sword of the Morning. Yeah.
Aaron.
Sir who?
Aaron.
I don't think that was Sir Aaron, but it was the guy with the 2 swords.
2 swords, yeah.
The Sword of the Morning. Sir Arthur Dayne, that's who it was.
Arthur Dayne.
And then he has that amazing, he has that amazing sword fight scene, and then Ned goes running into the tower, and then it's a mystery what happens, and then Hodor has his claim to fame after that, right? Hodor. And then and then you get to, which we're going to talk about, Kelly's episode here that she's picked as her favorite, the Battle of the Bastards, and how gratifying that is, and how gratifying they wrap up that season. So for me, season 6 makes up for all of the past misery and suffering we had leading up to it. That's how I feel. So when I have to go back to watch one season, it's that season. When Jon Snow lives all the way up to the Battle of the Bastards with Daenerys sailing for Westeros at the end of the season. Boom. That's my that's what I'll leave you with. And Kelly, do you have any other thoughts before I pull up the episode you want to talk about?
No, I'm good.
I think I took the wind out of the sails there, but you're going to have a chance.
I think you're right with the progression from that season on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Ramsay needed to go. Everybody can agree that he needed to go.
Yes. And with Sansa at the end of that episode, and she's just walking, and she's like, and then she kind of gets that little smile. I'm just like, yes.
Well, that's just it, right?
And that episode, well, I'm sorry. Did you have a little thing you wanted to do before we started talking about it?
Yeah, I mean, I only have one image to pull up that I think represents the peak fun of that episode.
Yes.
It's this.
Yes.
It's this. Sorry, I pull up. I pull up images a little differently from how Zazel does it. I kind of do it the crude way, which is why you see all the stuff at the top, whereas he does it the more professional way by prepping it all ahead of time, whereas I just kind of pull internet images. But this encapsulates what that episode was about.
100%. And when people say, what was your favorite episode? That is exactly what I picture. When I say Battle of the Bastards, that image right there is what I picture. 100%.
So you got to bear in mind, moments before, Ramsay puts an arrow through Rickon.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So this represents so much.
They're outnumbered.
Yes.
They're outnumbered. They're coming for him. John's by himself.
Yes.
Seemingly so.
Yes.
And he's just like, all right, if this is how I'm going to go out. Oh my God, I'm starting to get emotional over this right now.
It is. It is.
If this is the way I'm going to go out, I'm going to go out fighting. I'm going to go out like the Stark that I am, or the bastard that I am. I don't know. But he's fighting for Winterfell, his family home, and he is going out fighting. And I think I watched this entire scene like this. And I think a friend of mine told me, he goes, Kelly, at one point I look over at you and you had your eyes completely covered. And I was like, I did, because I was like, ah! You know what I mean? It was just the emotions that I felt watching this episode and this scene in particular. And then who comes to save the day? Littlefinger and Sansa.
Peter Baelish. Yes. That's right. That's right. Because I think she'd sent the Raven to him to come help. And one of the things my coworker said that I thought was very apt was there's that scene where Jon is kind of getting trampled. He's kind of like in the sea of dead bodies. And you feel the suffocation. Like you feel yourself suffocating because you want this guy, this underdog who's already died once, right? Who was never accepted, who's struggling at the wall, right? Finally became Lord Commander after, he didn't even know if he wanted it. And now he's coming to get his revenge. He's holding that sword, and in his name is, I'm fighting for Ned. I'm fighting for Robb. I'm fighting for Catelyn, the mother who didn't even want me. I'm fighting for the brother Rickon you just killed, right? He's holding that sword, and that's what he's fighting for. And that's why this episode is so gratifying at the end, when he gets to the end and he tackles Ramsay, who's trying to shoot an arrow at him. And this is after Ramsay's killed the giant, right? That bashed the door down, right? And when he tackles Ramsay and he just starts hitting them, you want to jump off your couch and just start doing the same thing.
Yes.
Right? That's how I felt, right? Yeah. And that's why this episode is so gratifying. And then you say at the end, Kelly, Ramsay's dogs haven't eaten for days, and Sansa just feeds Ramsay to them, and she walks away with that smirk on her face. And it's just like, all the suffering, everything we saw, like this made the Red Wedding worth it.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Retribution. Revenge has been taken. Yes. Oh, this episode, everything about this episode. And not that the episode after this was bad, but it was kind of, I was like, well, this episode is kind of sucks after that one.
Well, you know what? Do you want to, what you don't know is the moment that I picked because you already took this one. The episode that I picked, actually, and I'm gonna pull it up here in a second, to talk about is the episode after.
Oh, okay.
And it's because I think it does a great job of wrapping things up, right? This is where they declare him king in the North. Now, some people found it a bit cringy that all of a sudden you're rehashing the king in the North. One of my friends, Jeff, said that this felt like it was just a bunch of ass kissers and bandwagoners suddenly just jumping on the Jon Snow train when they all held their swords up. But depending on how you viewed it, it could be a very emotional rehash, because now it's a real battle, and this guy's not going to lose. He's not Robb. He's not his brother. He's going to win. I'll tell you why I like this episode, because this is the episode right before this, moments before, is when they reveal his parentage. And it was the perfect episode. Like, the episode before is so heavy battle-wise. And you need to wrap down and leave all the perfect anticipation for the next season. So when they reveal Jon's parentage, right? When they declare him king in the North, when Cersei sits on the throne because earlier in the episode, her last son Tommen had jumped out of a window, or maybe it was earlier in the season, but I think he jumps out of a window, right? So now she's on the throne, right? And the season ends with Daenerys sailing from Essos to Westeros with 3 dragons flying ahead, and they zoom out and they see all the ships, kind of like that scene in Troy when they show the whole Greek army and all the Spartans sailing towards Troy, and you have that pan out and you see the entire fleet and you go, it's on. And then they cut it off, and that was the longest wait for me before the next season, because things were finally, like, the good guys were finally starting to win.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I felt with this episode.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So.
I agree with that. I meant more it was a letdown because, like, that episode was so, like, my emotions were so, like, up and down. And I think when the Peter Baelish comes, Littlefinger comes, I think I end up, like, jumping up and, like, cheering.
Baelish.
Who else was gonna come? Who else was gonna come save him? Right? It had to be Baelish, right?
Somebody had to come, right? And Sansa earlier in the, I'm sorry, I'm going back to the previous episode, but earlier in the episode, Jon and Sansa are talking about it, and he's like, "Who's gonna come?" Because she's like, "We just need to wait. Let's wait until we have more numbers." And he's like, "No one's coming." But it's like she knew Peter was coming, but she was gonna save that.
She was sandbagging it for him. It was like
she was going to keep it in her pocket.
That's the thing, is he's like, I mean, I'm not sure. Does she write the letter to Baelish after that? I'm not sure. But she does say it's not enough. And he says it's not enough. It's what we have. We have to jump into it, right?
Yeah.
Now, speaking of Sansa and the Starks, now Hans, for his key moment, has picked something a little more subtle. And I like this because the artist behind Hans is going to explain to us why a moment like this is something special to him. Because we're going way back now. I think this is season 2, isn't it?
Season 2, yeah. The battles and the fighting and all that stuff is very good. And I will go on record as saying it's some of the finest I've seen on TV. And people always complain about the strategies they use or whatever, but hindsight is 2020. And also, they're dragons. It's a fantasy show. Relax, you know? So...
right.
This scene didn't happen in the books. It was Roose Bolton instead of Tywin Lannister, I believe.
I think it was, yes.
Yeah, it was Roose Bolton, I believe, who couldn't have died fast enough. But anyway, also, those two guys. Anyway, so this is a fantastic scene. Any scene that's like this is perfect because you see two things. You see Tywin Lannister at, in my opinion, his best. He's commanding his army. He understands that he's losing, which is a big deal for him. And while his daughter is off doing her brother, anyway, or whatever, it's very much these scenes where he's trying to like secure his family line, trying to like seize hold, the legacy. And he mentions legacy to Arya, and this is after he's essentially destroyed the majority of hers, and she has to play it very cool. You see her intelligence, you see her survival instincts start to come into play. You see her introduction to the Brotherhood. You see also this wonderful dynamic. You see that Tywin is not a hateful man, because here's a little girl that he just met and doesn't know, takes her in as cupbearer, takes her away from the rest of the prisoners, speaks to her very candidly about everything going on, because the reality is he can't trust anyone around him anymore, because everyone's either kissing his ass because he's the head of the Lannister family, planning to kill him, or has some other duplicitous means. But here he's found a little girl who he doesn't even know is also duplicitous, and he's speaking very candidly to her. He speaks to her of history, he speaks to her of, this will be my last war, this will be the one they'll remember me for. And you can see that she absorbs all these things, because later on down the line, whether she likes it or not, she moves like Tywin. The way they outmaneuver Peter Baelish is a Tywin maneuver. She learned that from him. So this man who has destroyed her family, she has taken on some of his very own characteristics.
Oh, the strategic, yes, like how he goes, and because she tends to combine what she learned from Tywin with what she learned from the Faceless Men to go after and kill Walder Frey.
Pretty much everybody. Yeah.
Yes.
And the balance that you see here is good writing. Now, this is something that they changed, of course, from the book, and I don't mind that because it allows two characters who never should have interacted to interact. This is a choice that these new independent writers made, and it's a good one. It's an excellent one. And if you go and you sit down, you listen to the dialogue, because it's only about 12 minutes long, anytime that they speak together, it's memorable moments. Because there's a moment where I think Tywin tells her, "You sound a lot like my daughter." You know, most girls would want to be talking about princes and have ribbons rolled in their hair. And then Arya, of course, replies by saying, "Most girls are idiots." And it's the only time Tywin laughs in the entire series.
Well, you know what?
The moment he laughs.
I actually didn't realize that was the only time he laughed. But the thing
I
about
didn't know that either.
This is not smile. This is ha 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 laugh. He smiles a lot, but mostly his smiles are, "Oh, you're dead," and that's the smile. But this is the only time he laughs.
Tywin, the actor Charles Dance, just has such an on-screen presence, and what it reminds me of is Saruman from Lord of the Rings. If they ever, because R.I.P. Christopher Lee, who lived a lengthy 90-year life, if they ever had to recast Saruman in Lord of the Rings, this is Saruman in my mind. Yes. Charles Dance, Tywin Lannister is Saruman. Okay. I know that's kind of beside your point, but this is kind of, you picked a subtle moment here. And what I didn't realize until you said it is that a lot kind of sprouts out of this. Here's Arya, an innocent girl trying to learn how to fight, but she combines the sort of like war and strategic tactics from Tywin with what she learns over in the Free Cities in order to become the character she becomes. Right? It's part of her character arc that's just so important. Wow, we're getting hot and heavy here, guys. Like this is a lot.
Well, one thing that you touched on with Arya and Tywin and him basically teaching her you brought up Peter Baelish's death, Littlefinger's death, and that was also a very satisfying scene to watch.
Oh, he's such a jerk. There were a lot of jerks in this.
There were.
But he was number one though, because he started the entire thing. Yeah. He started the entire thing.
Jaime arguably was the first jerk, but his jerkishness comes he's like a bully, but Peter Baelish is a real jerk, a real piece of work.
Well, if Baelish doesn't betray House Stark, right, then that's kind of how it starts, right? As for Jaime, after he loses his hand, he becomes a whole new character. But because I asked Hans about his favorite characters, let's jump right into that, because when I asked Hans, we got some characters to talk about. He goes, "I want to be the one to talk about Tywin and Jaime." I didn't realize he was this big a fan of House Lannister, but
House Lannister is my favorite house. Wow. It is my favorite house, not because they're the heroes, but because they're a bunch of broken people, and I have a fondness because broken people have more repairing that they need to do. The Lannisters started broken. The Starks started very solidly, and then they break, and then they fix again. The Lannisters started broken, and they remained broken. So I'll speak about Jaime first, and then I'll speak about Tywin first, actually. And you must give me a few moments.
You have the floor.
I want to take notes, perhaps. So Tywin started, and Tywin, if you read the books, was a very happy man at one time. He loved his wife. He loved his wife. He loved his children. He gave them everything they could. And there's a fantastic scene that he tells Arya again. The Maester said that Jaime couldn't read. He reverses the letters. I sat Jaime down for 4 hours every day and made him read, and he hated me for it. But that's the act of a true parent. Sometimes it's not about what's best for, what's most comfortable. It's what's best for the child, and so he was being a good father. Then Tyrion was born. And when Tyrion was born, of course, in addition to being a dwarf, he killed Tywin's wife during childbirth. And they said after that, Tywin never smiled again, But he understood his duty to his family. It didn't matter who he had to kill, stomp on, and or otherwise. He did the duty to his family, and he handed that down to his son, Jaime, and he handed that down to Tyrion, and he handed it down to Cersei, but Cersei didn't absorb it the way the others did. Tyrion knew his loyalty was to the Lannisters, and Jaime knew, and that order to kill the Targaryen king. I
Oh
forgot his
yeah,
name
the
now.
Mad King,
The
Ares,
Mad King.
Ares the
That
second. Yeah.
came from Tywin. That came from Tywin. And
Really?
oh yes.
Are
Oh
you
yes.
sure? Are you
Nope.
sure?
Yeah.
But I'm 500% putting my word on it, because Jaime put aside his vow for the White Cloaks. He pulled that sword and he killed him, because that is what his father told him to do. That is how he was educated to do it. And he knew it was going to brand him forever as a kingslayer.
No, but here's the thing. Ares tells Jaime, "Bring me your father's head." This is
Oh,
so.
yes. Of course.
But
And he also says, burn everything. I know.
burn every. But how does Tywin get a message to Jaime now in order to say kill the Mad King instead? Or are you saying it's built in him?
How is an order handed down? Is it given by word or is it given by lesson? Tywin had taught Jaime enough that he knew that as soon as this turned around, he was still for House Lannister.
Okay, there we go. So you're saying that that's from a lesson. It's not something verbal that happened during the battle. It's something like, I hear my father's voice, from teachings, and I'm gonna put.
And here we go.
Put a sword through the Mad King's back. Okay.
And of course, Tyrion was also the same thing. Tyrion was very much always for his family. Now, this moves on to the next point. So Jaime is the young, he was referred to as the young lion. And you see a contrast between him in the first season and the second season. Up to about halfway point, he's very cocky, very good with his skills, very everything. To the point where he tries to run from Brienne. Brienne actually beats him up because he's hungry and starved and hasn't trained in a long time and all these different things. And then he loses his hand. And from there, we see a different Jaime. We see him start to turn around as he now no longer has the shielding of his father. And he's also trying to shed that idea of being the Kingslayer. And we see this evolution, this like a villain turn around. And then there's this critical moment where he knows that Cersei's going to die. And Brienne is in the bed behind him, sleeping, and she hears the door close. And she comes outside wrapped in nothing but a sheet, and she begs him not to leave. But he still goes ahead and does it. And he tells her, I'm a terrible person. I threw a child from a window for Cersei. I would have burned down all of Westeros for Cersei. He loved his twin sister so much, he would have done all these things for Cersei. And it's a remarkable character flaw. And I like that. I like the fact that despite all the improvement he's done, it's like a cocaine addict. You're never really going to break that addiction. And the reality is, in the first season, he threw a child from a window. He committed that cardinal sin at the start of his arc, and he had to pay for it. And the only way that I could think of, and there's no better way for him to pay for it, than to, despite everything he's done to improve his character, for him to go right back to the thing that made him throw that child from that window and die next to it. You know what I mean? So I know it's brutal, and I know a lot of people rooted for him, and a lot of people loved him, but he had to pay for that death. And I understood that this would be the worst way for him to pay for it, or the best way, depending on how you look at it. And I enjoy that. I enjoy that a lot.
I'm wiping the sweat off my brow listening to this depth of analysis, because I thought I could analyze things deep, but here's Hans with wow, I never really looked at it that way. I just followed the progression. Like, holy crap. You definitely, because you followed it. Like, you looked at the bookends of the character. You didn't just ride the bandwagon tidal wave of, oh, I hate Jaime. Oh, I love Jaime. Oh, Jaime's getting better. Oh, we lost him. Like, because that's the progression of the character in the simplest of terms. You looked at it for, here's the cardinal sin. You get to redeem yourself just in time to pay for the sin. And that's how you've analyzed this. And it's just, oh my goodness. Like, that's what I like about how you pick the less obvious moments of this series in order to analyze and get this analyzed. Like,
it's a shame how people have judged this series so harshly, because it's beautiful. It is really, really well done. And actually, when you told me we were doing this and I had the opportunity to sit down and watch it again, I loved it even more.
How much did you rewatch? Because I gave you like 7 days notice.
First of all, you don't get to judge me. That's first of all. I may have watched everything, but I'm not going to give you that evidence, I sat down. So I'm a bit of a nerd. I don't know if you've realized. So I sat. So the Last Jedi came out, and I didn't enjoy it. And my friends were very good at saying, "Oh, I hated it." But if I ask you why, you should be able to say why you hated it. I know I didn't like it, but I don't want to say I hate something without good reason. So I actually rewatched Last Jedi 3 times, and I sat there with a pen and paper, and I wrote down what I didn't like about it, and I wrote down what I liked about it. And then when people ask me, I actually have, oh, well, I didn't like this, I didn't like this, but this was good, and I like this, and this is how they could have fixed it. And therefore, I don't hate it as much as other people, because hate's a really strong word. I mean, that's reserved for just like very few things, Like I hate watercress, not hate watercress. I hate eggplant. I hate eggplant. I don't want anything to do with it. You know what I mean? But that's like one of very few things that I hate, to say with people is like, I love chocolate. Do you? Do you know what love means? It's, you have to be armed and ready. You have to be ready. And I just felt Game of Thrones got a lot of hate. And I suspect that people don't understand the quality that they actually watched. And it's not fair to the writers. It's not fair to the actors. And it's not fair to us as viewers, because it was wonderful. And this is not even me getting into Cersei, who I also thought was a brilliant character. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if you want me to dig that too. But
there may be opportunity to talk about Cersei in a moment, because we're gonna transition to when I asked Kelly to pick her favorite. She also picked 2. She couldn't narrow it down. But maybe what we'll do is we'll jump into Tyrion and Daenerys. We'll circle back to Cersei, and then we'll go with the super obvious vanilla choice that I picked as my favorite character. But I'm gonna give Kelly the floor for a bit. But I really want to hear what Hans has to say about Cersei. So, Kelly, talk us through your favorites.
Well, I won't take too long. It's definitely not going to be such an in-depth analysis as Hans. I loved Dany because I loved her character progression. She started as this young girl, very naive and innocent to what was going on. Her brother's pushing her into this marriage with this man she can't even talk to. It was scary for her, obviously. And then she, ended up turning into Daenerys Stormborn, and I loved her character arc. She was excuse the language, everyone. She was a badass bitch. And even in the end, when everyone says, oh, she went crazy and Jon killed her, I will never forgive Jon for that. That was this might clue everyone into my own mental health, but I didn't think she was that
bad. Wow.
Because, well, first of all, we didn't have enough time to see for them to show how bad she had gotten, because I'm thinking in the end, I'm like, well, she's conquering cities. She's conquering King's Landing. What do you think it looks like when someone conquers a city, especially when she's already given Cersei the warning, I'm coming for you. So either surrender or I'm coming. And Cersei doesn't do that. So she made good on her promise and she gets killed for it. Jon and Tyrion, by the way, because that was Tyrion's doing. But with Tyrion, he drinks and he knows things. And I too drink and sometimes think I know things. Who doesn't love Tyrion? I mean, his wit, I loved him. I loved his mind, the way he thought about things, the way he came up with things. I just loved Tyrion and I loved his character. And that is my in-depth analysis of Dany and Tyrion.
How many times did Peter Dinklage win Best Actor? Had to be three or four times he won Best Supporting Actor for the series, right?
And he was also in more episodes than any other character.
I think you're right, because there's very few episodes that he wasn't in.
Yeah, I think he was in 61 out of 67 or something like that.
Yeah, and one of the
Don't quote
episodes
me
he
on
wasn't
that,
in.
because yeah.
No, but I believe that because there was one of the episodes he wasn't in was in that battle at the wall, which I'll get to in a bit. But Hans, Cersei Lannister, who doesn't get enough love, you're going to give her some.
Before we run away, I just want to point out in my research into Tywin, and there's a scene in the books that doesn't happen where he's speaking to his cousin, and his cousin points at Tyrion and says, "Don't be so cruel to him. Of all your children, that is your son." And that kills Tywin on the inside a little bit, because he knows that that boy is absolutely and totally, his kid. Anyway, a little bit of love about Cersei. Cersei in the first season, and down all the way to the last thing, because Tyrion comes to the wall of King's Landing and he tells her, "You're a loving mother," and all these things. She had the same thing her father had taught her, which is in essence this hyper loyalty to her family. And one thing that people don't understand about Cersei, and well, more about Jaime, is that Jaime watched every single one of his children die. Because they always think of Cersei and Jaime as brother and sister. They don't think of them as husband and wife. And in essence, it was an incestuous relationship, but they did love each other very much. And they both lost all those kids, right? And Cersei amplified and exemplified Tywin's loyalty to family, to a point, of course, to self-destruction. Because each of those children, the martial skill of Jaime, the intelligence and cunning of Tyrion, and the loyalty all make up Tywin. So it's very much this, his attributes broken into these three. It's kind of what makes her so hateable, because she's so uncompromisingly loyal to her family. But it's a respectable trait, because all of the other families are very loyal to their own families as well. The only difference, of course, is that they stand on the plateau of morality, where she does not. She's written to be a villain, and she's a fantastic one, which makes her so lovable, because she's hateable. But she's also very pitiable. She's lost all these children, and there's one thing that's very important. Tywin married her to Robert Baratheon, and she loved Robert Baratheon. From the moment she saw him, she loved him. But Robert Baratheon was in love with Eddard Stark's sister, who had been stolen by Rhaegar Targaryen.
Lyanna Stark. Yeah.
Yes, and he could never love anyone else. And there are some moments in the first season where she's very much doting over Robert and trying to get him to, even though he's in his twilight years and he's fat and he's drunk, and she still loves him so much. But she can't have him. And that's the tragedy of Cersei's character. And the first moment, sleeping with Jaime, doing this thing with Robert, very much echoes her end as well, right? She died because she only fell into Jaime's arms because he consoled her when Robert rejected her. And from that first sin, born her 4 children, who all died. She paid for it all there, disgraced in religion because she was rejected by the High Sparrow. And then she died next to her first sin. The only difference is where Jaime had a redemption arc. She, like Macbeth, was so seeped in blood, rather than return from where she went, she proceeded forward in blood. So 2 sides of the same coin as twins, one redeemed, one not, but dying at the same time to the same fire, which arguably could be an analogy for hell. But go ahead.
Hans, the influencer, getting people to watch the show. How it goes. I mean, I think, Gaz, to your comment there, Hans just made the show seem better than it was.
It was always this
made
good.
Cersei seem better.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know how I'm even going to follow that. So I'm just simply going to say, sorry, Hans?
If you know Jane Austen, the writer, Jane Austen, Jane Austen wrote every one of her books, and in every one of her books, she always said that none of my characters are villains. They're just people bought over by circumstance. And J.R. Martin took that to heart. None of these people are villains. Look at Peter Baelish. He's not a villain. He was bullied his entire life. And they forced him into this position of having to use his intellect to get some kind of control. Control is a key theme in the whole series. It's all about control, which is a theme song, which kind of makes me want to sing it right now. But anyway, I'll do it. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful to see such realistically written characters, even Ramsay to a certain degree. It's all about control.
Wow. Well, speaking of control and someone who didn't want it, I mean, I simply picked the most vanilla character as my favorite character, which is Jon Snow.
You're getting real good at them segues, boy. You're getting real good at them segues.
No, hey, as long as it's a natural flowing segue, but I will say that Peter Dinklage is my my favorite actor on the show. Mm-hmm. But Jon Snow's character arc is probably the most heroic out of all of them. You know, if you're a fan of House Targaryen, no, you won't forgive him for having to put Dany to the sword. I understand that, Kelly. I also think that when you take the most typical underdog story, the rejected one who nobody wanted, but there's something special about him, and you know something good's going to happen, but you still have to create a wonderfully beautiful story around him. You know, the underdog who, and you're both rolling your eyes at me here, right? The underdog who befriends the perpetual underdog in Sam. You know, the one who loses his innocence to the wildling girl, Ygritte, you know, who goes and befriends the wildlings, gets the army behind him, turns them to kind of the side of the good, is the one who uncovers the fact that the wildlings are so misunderstood throughout the whole series. He's the first one to come face to face with the Night King in season 5. His story gets progressively more forward movement. You know, he has to go against Alliser Thorne at the Wall. And the reason why, for a lot of people who don't know, why Sir Alliser is so hostile to Jon Snow during the series is because during the war with the Mad King, Ned Stark is the one who sends Sir Alliser to the Wall. So that's why when his bastard comes, that's why they're always at odds. He still, after all that, after the battle at the Wall, which was going to be another one of my moments, I was going to say that end of season 4 battle at the Wall was another one of my favorite moments in the series. One of the finest pieces of filmography ever done. Even after he wins that and becomes Lord Commander, doesn't really want it, but he takes it, right? He gets betrayed by Sir Alliser, is left for dead. So now you have to bring him back to life. And then he has his underdog story where he's the one who goes and takes back Winterfell, right? Then goes, aligns himself with the Targaryen queen, bends the knee to her, and still has to be the one at the end who puts an end to her reign of terror. After all that, he's been through a lot. And that's why, like, for a vanilla underdog character, I think they did really well with Jon Snow. Radio silence. And where is your cap with the bell? Because I would really welcome that right now.
No, I liked Jon Snow's character also. What, maybe not my favorite, but I did like it, or like him. He was, like you said, honorable. He was all about honor, right? But then he breaks some of his vows with Ygritte, and you know, not supposed to be doing that when you're on the Night's Watch, right?
Does he though? The vow is, I shall take no wife, father no children, hold no lands. Nothing about having a girlfriend for a little while.
I thought they had to be celibate, though. Didn't they have to be celibate?
I'm not sure. I'm just trying to read off the vows, right?
Yeah,
the night gathers, and now my watch begins. Part of the vows.
Yeah. So I don't disagree with you about what you said about Jon, because I do like Jon. Now, he killed Dany, so that's unforgivable to me, but he was talked into that by Tyrion, and he felt bad about it later, wondering, you know, he even asked Tyrion, was that the right thing to do? I'm not sure if that was the right thing to do. And it was not, Jon. It was not the right thing to do.
But it is. She became the Mad Queen. It is the right thing to do.
She was not mad. She was conquering. She was conquering King's Landing. You know, I have to say, as a mom, you have to, if you're going to make a threat and give your kid a consequence, you have to follow through with that, or
Absolutely.
they're not going to believe you, right? So when
Absolutely.
she's standing there with her dragons and she's telling someone, you bend the knee or my dragons are going to fry your ass, and they don't bend the knee, she has to follow through with what she said, right? So she's got to fry him. Otherwise, her threats mean nothing. No one's going to believe her. Why are we going to be afraid of Dany and her dragons? She's not going to do anything with them. She's nothing. She's no one. And the fact that she's a woman, she has to work even harder to be queen, to be respected, to be able to be this conqueress.
All right.
She says to Jon, let's recreate the wheel. And I'm like, yes, let's recreate the wheel. And then he's like, I'm like, what? You fucking idiot. Why did you do that? No. I think that was another time I stood up and started like throwing things at the TV. I was not happy. But I will say there's that one iconic scene at the cinematographer did an amazing job. And it was like a little foreshadowing where she's standing there and the dragon comes up behind her and it's her with wings, the dragon wings. Oh, I love that.
Wow.
Anyway, that is my rant. She was not mad. Well, she was mad because she was trying to conquer, but she wasn't mad.
She was crazy, but not that kind of crazy.
I mean, you got to be a little crazy, right? To conquer. And, you know, no one would have said anything if it was Robert doing it or Ned or a man. It would have been fine. She wasn't burning everyone.
None of the Targaryens started off burning everyone. Like the Mad King wasn't always mad either, but it's really Jon Snow. Let me deal with that. So let's look at all the characters, right? So what was Ned Stark's cardinal sin, right? What was Ned Stark's cardinal sin? He took Jon Snow on as his bastard and deceived his wife. He made this woman who has been loyal to him his whole life think that he had been unfaithful to her, which is not true. He did it as a last ditch effort for his sister to protect her son, who was, of course, a bastard Targaryen child. And so, of course, how did he pay for it? He paid for it as his death at the end of that story and being pulled into a battlefield that he was never prepared for. He's not a political intrigue kind of guy. He was a warrior and a knight and all these different things. And, of course, that's how he died. But the reason why I bring him up first is because let's point him at Jon Snow. Because Jon Snow, he told something critical to all his children. He who passes the sentence must carry out himself. And Jon Snow carried out every execution he'd ever passed down, including when Tyrion told him about Dany. He was the one that carried it out himself. So what was Jon Snow's cardinal sin that he had to pay for, right? He betrayed, of course, Ygritte, right? But he was very loyal to the Watch. So of the two things, the first vow he took was to the Watch and before Ygritte. Of course, I hate that name because I always feel like I'm pronouncing it wrong. But anyway, Ygritte. So he had to pay for that, and he did pay for that. He paid with his life. But then he came back. So he came back very much in that redemption arc. But he was loyal to everyone else, so he was allowed to survive the series. But no one survived the Game of Thrones or the Song of Ice and Fire, if you'd rather, unscathed. So even though he did survive, he was changed. And even at the end, because if he had chosen to be king, he would have betrayed that Night's Watch oath one more time. But he didn't. So he kept that and therefore was allowed to keep his happy ending, which I enjoyed about the character. We're in a sea of people who were only for themselves. He was the only one who thought of himself last. And I liked that about his character because everybody complained that he was boring. But I don't think that's correct. He was a contrast to all the other colorful people.
Boom.
Everybody, he made everybody else seem psychotic when he was so normal. And I enjoyed that because you need an anchor point. Because when everyone is a character and no one is normal, then everyone is normal. So you need to have him as that anchor point for everyone else's eccentricities. And you need everyone of every color of every eccentricity in order to make a good story. And him anchoring the story was what he was there for, and he did it perfectly.
Well, imagine a series without a Jon Snow, right? It completely changes it. It's like you lose that balance without him.
You do completely lose the balance. And who of all the people in that show, because even Tyrion had a sin. Tyrion killed his mom. So what was his punishment? He ended up alone. The only thing he wanted was to be accepted by his family. And now he's the only one left in his family, so he just needs to accept himself.
Mm.
Yeah, you're right, because I think even his uncle Kevin, who took over as Hand of the King, right? Because that's another underrated Lannister who kind of learned from Tywin, which we could go on about him, but you're right, even he's dead. Anyway.
He's the last one.
Yeah.
It's such a wonderful series. Such a wonderful, perfect circle. To me.
Well, favorite series of all time or not?
Game of Thrones always kicks it down. Game of Thrones always kicked down to Lord of the Rings, the 3 movies. Always. Because who doesn't love a happy ending, eh? If you're talking TV series, yeah, for sure.
Okay. Fair enough. Because you're right. Lord of the Rings ended happier than Game of Thrones, but yes. Which, you know what? That could be another stream talking about Lord of the Rings, because I could.
Oh no.
90 more minutes.
Something years to do that one.
You've had. Okay, Kelly.
I'm ready. My body is ready.
I would say Game of Thrones is my favorite drama series, TV series. Because I do have other shows that are my favorites, but it's like a comedy show. So it's like apples to oranges.
Fair enough.
But yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
I mean, the only other thing that I put up there with Game of Thrones, and no, I'm not going to count the cartoons of Transformers, G.I. Joe, and Masters of the Universe in this discussion. But the 2003 reimagining of Battlestar Galactica is about the only other thing that I could put around where Game of Thrones is. But mind you, it has its flaws as well. If I was to recommend something to people, I actually would say Game of Thrones, just because I think it caught the world on fire a little bit more, whereas Battlestar Galactica was kind of like this monster-sized cult following, that I don't think grew like wildfire to the same extent, but it was still very popular. But I usually recommend people to Game of Thrones just because of, well, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say why I recommend it over Battlestar Galactica.
Because Game of Thrones is more realistic.
You think so?
It is, yeah, because historically, take the dragons out, take the magic out, you'd still have a perfect story. Battlestar Galactica cannot be detached from its sci-fi elements.
Okay, there we go. Fair enough.
You could take the War of Roses historically, the Tudors versus the Lancasters, or the 116-year war, or the 100-year war between the French and the English. And both of those things are completely and totally framed here in Game of Thrones. It's more believable. More people can adapt to Game of Thrones than to accept, yes, the robot invasion. I remember that because it never happened.
So were the Lannisters based off the Lancasters?
I mean, the Tudors rewriting history for the Lancasters, certainly.
Okay.
Because the history is always written in the hand
by the victors. Right.
So Tudors rewrote the Lancasters as monsters, but if you read them historically, they weren't bad people. I mean, Richard III is responsible for maintaining the petty council as well as a proper judiciary system for England. Wow. But the Tudors never said that. They wrote him as a monster. They also wrote him as a cripple and a bunch of other things, and he wasn't. He was a good man.
Well, I'm glad you're here to be our encyclopedia, because I'm actually learning more about the series and the insights and everything with Hans on here. Now we got just over 10 minutes left, but we can run a little bit over time. But House of the Dragon is coming later this year, and I had to go back and read. Kelly, I showed you the book, the big tome that the World of Ice and Fire, the big red book there. And I went back and I read a little bit about King Jaehaerys at the time, and Rhaenyra Targaryen and Prince Daemon and Aegon, I think Aegon the Second, and how that whole thing comes in with the struggle for the throne, because the firstborn is a woman who was named as heir, but then the king remarried, and the second wife had a son, and the uncle is caught in the crossfire of who does he support. Are you guys excited for this, Hans? I know you said you might wait until it ends before you jump into it.
Whenever you should never make decisions when you're emotionally charged. You know what I mean? And if they draw it out to like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seasons, I'll wait 8 years. I don't mind. I'll wait 10 years. You know what I mean? Because if my patience means that I can remember something fondly, then my patience is worth it, sort of thing. Also, I have been consuming a lot of the Game of Thrones comics and stuff like that. Hedge Knight is a fantastic story. And if I can advise anybody who likes Game of Thrones, read Hedge Knight, because it has a wonderful ending as well.
You're talking about the story of Sir Duncan the Tall and Aegon,
Duncan the Tall.
And
Brienne
Aegon the Fifth.
That's the Duncan the Tall.
Sir Duncan the Tall is the ancestor of Brienne of Tarth, and Aegon is one of the Targaryens. So that's why it's called Dunk and Egg. Duncan Egg. Aegon, Dunk and Egg. So
and I mean, I know enough. I think I watched the history lesson of how Viserys and the rest of them, I can't remember his name, conquered Westeros.
Oh,
and
Aegon the First.
To me, that was enough. To me, that was enough. I find prequels sometimes to be a little offensive because it tends to undermine what we already know. And I'm worried that they may damage it because I'll be real with you. A lot of companies are not particularly respectful with prequel material. So there's some that are, but the statistics right now, for me at least, is they are not. And I wish that if they want, I'm interested to see what they'll do with Jon Snow's series. I want to see what he did after. Give me that. Show me where we go. Don't show me where we came from. You know?
Okay.
Because you could potentially just ruin something that I love, because I've given you everything I love so far. But they could easily just take a poop on it, you know? And I don't want them to, because I like it.
Oh.
Don't be afraid of the future. We go, everybody goes forward. Nobody goes back.
Fair enough. Kelly, what's your take on House of the Dragon? You gonna watch it? Excited for the Jon Snow series, or what's your take on both?
I will watch House of the Dragons, and as long as it's good, I'll keep watching it. And then the Jon Snow series, I'm really looking forward to that. What I'm really looking forward to, but they haven't even talked about it, so I'm hoping I'm going to put it out into the universe and hope someone does something. I would love to see Arya's adventures.
Oh, yeah.
West of Westeros. That's right.
Yeah. What's west of Westeros? I don't know. Let me see. What is west of Westeros, people? I want to see. Where does she go? What does she do? That's what I want to see. But yes, I'm excited for both of them, of course. I think the Jon Snow one is just in development, so it may not even happen. But Kit is signed on to do it. He's ready to do it. So
he's such a handsome man. You know, he has that dark face, and I enjoy that. You know, even though I'd say Rob and him played very well off of each other, because Rob was more charismatic, and Jon Snow played the damaged goods very well, and I like that about him. God, fantastic! I'm gonna watch it again if I have time.
Yeah, I mean, look, House of the Dragon could go for a few seasons just because it is basically about the Targaryen civil war, right? So to me, it's like, if they do go with the series, it could last for 3 seasons. I don't think it'll go the full 8, but could go for a few. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it does go for as long as the Game of Thrones. Maybe it exceeds Game of Thrones, and I'm hoping it does. I'm hoping it breaks new ground, breaks all the boundaries, and basically just gets us to forget some of the stuff we didn't like about Game of Thrones. They learn from whatever the mistakes are. Having said that, do a lot of prequels live up to the sequel? Not necessarily. You know, it can. Maybe not. I mean, flashback scenes from Godfather 2, if you call that a prequel, that more than lived up. But you see how I have to dig there.
I feel like though this is happening so many years before Game of Thrones that it's like a whole new series, really.
Well,
Like,
that's
yeah,
just
there's
it.
tie-ins, but
That's
it's
just it.
so, you know what I mean? Yeah.
We're not watching how how Anakin became Darth Vader, or how Obi-Wan went from being a Padawan to being the Master. We're watching something
Right.
that's quite disconnected. Yeah, Gaz is
Mhm.
curious if we're going to be doing a weekly review of each episode, and I won't be. I think it's going to take quite a bit of effort to do that, to watch. Kind of hoping Geek Dad Life will do something like that. Because they have a kind of a weekly podcast where they talk about like television and all the relevant stuff. Don't know how big fans they are of Game of Thrones, but someone will be doing one. Let's put it that way.
I just hope that whoever does it, they thorough and respectful, because sometimes it's better to do something well than to do something fast, because nobody remembers how long it took. They just remember how good it looked.
That's
so true. If someone does it, just be kind. If it's good, give it its good points. If it's bad, give it its bad points. Give both equal, and then of course don't be afraid to share your opinions. Because that's what it is. It doesn't make any sense to just shout stuff into echo chamber. That's kind of why we're talking, right? Because all three of us have different visions. All three of us have different influences, and all three of us have a different opinion. And I think it's good that everybody shares it in a respectful way, because that's kind of how we all get better. It's the heart of community.
Well, and this community has certainly been good to me. Like when I started on YouTube, like I know what it was like to build a Facebook community, but I didn't know that YouTube was going to be anything other than a lonely journey of, oh, here's some content. Then I meet you guys. I met you guys through other streams, through Zazel or through Michael Hans, how I met you, right? There's just so much community out there, right? And we've been going for a while here, but at the same time, I feel like I've kind of just scratched the surface. Like we're gonna, we go 90 minutes. I could go 9 hours with you guys. Stop to use the facility, stop to get a glass of water. Maybe I get a little bit hungry, but in between sipping my drink, my beverage of choice, and chewing bites of whatever, I would still be debating Game of Thrones with you guys. Because there's a lot I heard here that I'm like, you know what? If I stop and think about it, I might come back and be like, Kelly, I don't see your point anymore. Hans, I think you're wrong. Right? Like I'm gonna turn the stream off at some point. I'm gonna be like, no, I almost want a round 2, which I don't know if we're gonna get to that, but it's been fun just talking about this. I mean, just overall.
And everyone brings up a different point too,
We all pick different moments and we all pick different characters, right? I don't know. Kelly, any final thoughts on the series, the future, the past, specific characters?
Great series. It's one of those that I go back to and rewatch. I'll start rewatching the first season when I'm like in between binges. It's such a great show. And every time you watch it, you see something new. I've probably watched season 1 10 times, and every single time I see something new.
Fair enough.
It's just a great show, well written. Even season 8 was fine, I guess.
So I will say something about season 8 when that I thought of, Kelly, when you talk about that awesome cinematography where Daenerys is either standing or walking a camera, and then Drogon's wings just go like that. Yes. There is that scene a few episodes before, at the end, near the end of the Night's of the Night's King battle, where she's hovering over the Night's King and he's looking at her, right? And I mean, and what's coming, right? She's hovering over, she's about to end the war. I'm looking at I'm going, oh my God, Dracarys, motherfucker! I'm not trying to curse on my own stream. And she blows the fire out of him for what must have been about 15 seconds straight, right? And sorry, this is not a curse heavy stream, but what am I doing? Cursing on my own stream when I'm that excited. So when that thing happened, right? I'm like, yes! And I looked at the runtime of the episode, and there's still 24 minutes left. I'm like, oh, he's still alive. And sure enough, he was, and the fire couldn't kill him, but Dragon Glass did. Hans, take the floor for some closing remarks on the series.
Game of Thrones is a fantastic series. Don't listen to what everyone has shouted and screamed. Watch it. Enjoy it. May come to your own decisions, as you should do with everything, because there's a lot of good stuff in there. And to judge it on the opinions of a few people who would have hated it, whether it did well or whether it did poorly, is not a good decision. I mean, if you're into medieval fantasy, if you're into magic and intrigue and all this historical, this kind of historical piece, as well as the idea of any kind of fantasy world with a deep, deep mythos and history behind it, then hop on your horse and take a ride into Westeros. Bring your sword, bring your bear, and make sure you have a bag full of coins, because it will be a good journey and you will definitely not come out on the other end of it any worse.
If anything, you'll come out better. Well, I've certainly enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Westeros. I feel like putting on a suit of armor, or at least walking into a council chamber or something.
You'll at least lose a hand,
Nah. All right, I'll leave the armor out. I'll just walk into the council chamber and have some wine or something. I mean, look, a lot of people. Here's the problem with looking at it in retrospect, right? When we're watching it, a lot of people are feeling it's the best thing we've ever watched. When you rank something on a scale of 1 to 10, I felt this was the one that a lot of people felt it was going to break the 10-point scale. It was going to establish a new 10-point scale up here. Because if we use the 10-point scale, this thing's an 11. It's a 12. It's that good. So when there's shortcomings near the end, people are like, oh, okay. So it became a bit of a letdown, because you had it on a pedestal that was so high up. When it faltered at all, it was hard to be like, to kind of accept it, right? Because it was just so perfect all throughout. And as you get to the end, you're let down a little bit because your expectations are up here. That's why. If you take your expectations from before the series started, it didn't fail. It's just we set new standards as the series progressed, and those standards kept going up, and it was going to be hard to ever live up to that standard. And some people say the books are better, and I've read the 5 books that have come out, but the 7th book is not out yet. I mean, do I hope for a little better ending? Did I hope and wish that the Blu-ray, when it came out, had an extended edition ending that would have been better for us? I was praying for all that. But in the end, I can't recommend the show enough. I think a lot of people who didn't watch it didn't want to, because they heard some of the negative backlash at the end. And I think that's such a disservice to everything that came before that, right? And even the way it ended, like I said, was it bad, or was it just bad compared to what we were spoiled with season after season?
Yeah.
And that's where I'll leave those thoughts.
Agreed.
Right?
Yeah.
Agreed. So why don't you guys tell us where we can find you? Kelly, tell us where we can find you on social media.
Yes, you can find me on Instagram at Slaughterdaughter Official. You can find me on Facebook at Slaughterdaughter or Kelly Slaughter. And on YouTube, you can find me at Slaughterdaughter. Okay.
So, like I said, wrestling has more than one royal family. So that's where, if you haven't figured it out, she's a Slaughter. There we go. And tell your dad to watch this episode.
Of course.
All right.
He's a Game of Thrones fan also, by the way.
Awesome. I just followed you
because
and him on Twitter. So good. All right. So the old man will be watching, because that's an order. Hans.
You can find me. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I am on Twitter. You just said Twitter, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm on Twitter too. It's _SGT daughter.
Perfect. Awesome. Sorry. Looking forward to the retweets and tweets aplenty. All right. Hans, where do we find you?
You can find me on Instagram, Hans_Chow. And thank you to everybody who has followed me that is new. I'm very thankful. All the people who suggested things to draw. I'm definitely going to draw all of it. So patience, and thank you very much for following me.
And you had a great Slaughter family artwork that you did in the past.
It's almost done. I was working on it before I came here, so it'll be done before today.
So you guys can give me a follow on Instagram as well. Toy Connections, 1 word, or Toy Connections, 2 words. I just created a Facebook page. I'm simul streaming to that Facebook page right now. And with with that, just want to say thanks before I forget. Thanks to the Patreon supporters and the channel members, because I try to shout you guys out, even if your names are all in the description. I still shout you guys out anyway. Next week, myself, Gaz, who's in the chat, Ryan Sweeney, who was in the chat earlier, and Zazel are going to be on to talk about the Monday Night War era of wrestling, WWE and WCW. That'll be a two-part thing covering 1995 to 1998 for up to when Stone Cold wins the belt and WWE turns the tide. And we're going to do a second episode from 1998 to 2001 to close out the war on a couple of upcoming episodes. Otherwise, thank you guys for joining all of us here on this episode of TKO. And the reason I do that thing is because Dr. Britt Baker calls herself DMD on AEW, so I've started doing the TKO thing the same way. But thank you guys for joining us on this riveting journey back to Westeros, where we've talked about Game of Thrones past, present, and future. And with that, adios, and I will say goodbye to you guys.
Take care.
Until next time.